Steve and Todd here from programtheblockchain.com. Today we would like to talk to you about payment channels. Payment channels are essentially a way to scale making frequent, small, they don't have to be small, but making sort of frequent payments without making a bunch of on-chain transactions. We're going to go through why that's an interesting problem to solve, and then how payment channels address that. This is something we see a whole bunch of questions on. We wrote a couple blog posts that there's going to be a link to with this video. Those do a good job of, I think, getting into some of the details of what you need to do, like in your smart contract and whatever.
All the code.
Yeah, but they kind of, I think they've left people wondering a little bit more of like why those things are necessary and how it all fits together.
If you're new to payment channels, we don't motivate them and why they have to be the way they are quite as much as show you the code.
So we thought a video would be a good way to do that. So let's set this up as so Todd and I are in some sort of business relationship. I, for whatever reason, am paying Todd to write tweets.
For all my readers.
Yeah. And as you can imagine, I'm not paying him very well for that work. And so each tweet, let's say, I'm paying you 25 cents for a tweet that you write. So the most natural thing to do, maybe we can already draw this out. So this is me. It looks just like me.
Should have drawn me.
Yeah, okay, you can draw yourself. Once you saw how I drew me, you didn't want me to be in charge of drawing you. So those are us, and one of the most natural things to do is every time Todd writes a tweet, I send him money. So there's quite literally sort of a direct line between us with dollar signs, where each one is sort of a payment that's going across.
Right. And we should stress, we anticipate a lot of payments.
Right. 25 cents a tweet, but you're going to tweet up a storm.
I got to make a living.
Exactly. Tweets are short. You can do a lot of them. So this is okay. There's a question, though, that we immediately have to resolve, which is, am I prepaying for a tweet? Am I paying you before you write the tweet? In which case, I run the risk that I'll pay you and you won't actually tweet.
Exactly.
Or are you going to tweet and every time you do, you send me a bill, I cut you a check? Right?
Exactly.
Both give us what changes between those is who has risk.
Who's trusting who?
Right. But the risk is 25 cents or the work of writing one tweet, because presumably after I don't pay up, you're going to stop doing the work, or the other way around. So that works, but there's sort of another challenge of this, which is, well, I'm paying you with Ether on the blockchain, and making a transaction on Ethereum costs money in the form of gas. So I don't know what the current gas prices are and whatever, but you can imagine that out of each of these 25-cent payments, we're paying several cents at least to just make the transaction happen, and that adds up in a lot of these small transactions. So there are a couple things we can do about that. And the first step, I think, is just like, let's batch them.
Right. Basically, increase the amount of trust.
Right.
And risk.
Right. So the trade-off we make here is, well, let's do less frequent transactions, but that means instead of just, so say every 10 tweets you write, I write you a check for $2.50 instead of these quarter tweets. Well, now, again, am I paying you first, or are you billing me afterwards? And now the risk is $2.50 or 10 tweets instead of just one tweet or 25 cents. And in the extreme, you can imagine, like, I'm paying you to write these tweets for a year. At the end of the year, you're going to send me a bill.
Right.
Or I'm going to pay up front, and at the end of the year, you're going to refund me. And either way, now we're talking about a year's worth of work and a year's worth of pay that are tied up in this. So the question, I guess, that we're about to give a solution to is there a way to batch these up and do sort of a minimal number of transactions on the blockchain, but also not have this huge amount of risk that one of us is carrying?
Right. Exactly.
So the solution is to, well, what questions, so where does the trust come in? It's like, let's say I'm going to pay you at the end of the year. The trust comes in is that you're assuming that I'm actually going to pay at the end, and you have no guarantees around that.
And you could get hit by a truck. I mean, there's lots of reasons you might not pay,
Right.
independent
I
of
like
being untrustworthy.
how generous you were in assuming that it's going to be some horrible accident and not just me being a jerk. And so one way to solve that is to escrow the money, right? This is, even forget about the blockchain. That's a solution that people use in these sort of high, where there's not a lot of trust and there's a high value of assets being exchanged. And so basically I can set aside the money, you write all your tweets, and then at the end of the year, by virtue, we're hand waving for a second here, but by virtue of the escrow, you know that you will actually
There's a
get
trusted
paid.
escrow agent of some form.
Right.
Where I can show them the bill, they pay me, or
Right.
yeah.
Right.
I show them the tweets, they know you owe me the money, give it to me.
Right. Exactly.
Vice versa.
Exactly. So let's modify. Let's do this. Let's imagine that we've got something there. It won't be a surprise to people that it's going to be a smart contract that's doing this escrow. But so we have some. I like to draw them with this little like a file kind of thing. So this is our smart contract that's escrowing the money, and so now the flow looks like I do something and send some money into the smart contract.
You're initiating the escrow.
Right. And then ... But at the end of the year,
Well, I send a.
sure.
I communicate somehow with the escrow agent saying, "Hey, there's a Steve owes Todd."
Right.
I
Right.
present something,
And money comes back out.
and money comes back,
Right.
and possibly there might be money left over that can go back to you.
Right. Exactly. Right. And so after this, some remainder of the escrow money that we didn't use up throughout the year come back. So the question that we sort of the ... and the question was like, what is it that you sent to the smart contract? So in the real world, this might be proof that you had done the task.
Right.
So I asked you to write a bunch of tweets. You come in with twitter.com open on your laptop and you say, look, I tweeted like crap. And it goes, great, here's the money that you're owed. But the smart contract living in Ethereum doesn't know anything about Twitter, and it doesn't know, you can't show it sort of the proof that you did the job you were hired to do. And so instead, what we're going to use instead is signatures. So every time you tweet, you're going to go, hey, Steve, I tweeted, and I'm going to go, great, and I'm going to sign something that acknowledges that, yes, you did the task that was assigned. And that's going to act as proof that the smart contract can understand, because it knows how to understand digital signatures, and it can verify that basically I already said, yes, you did the work. And so instead of each tweet I send you some payment, some actual money, each tweet I'm going to sign a message.
Right. So why don't we draw that?
Sure.
So in fact, why don't we go through the sequence of steps so it's clear. So again, you set up the escrow agent. I tweet. Has nothing to do with the smart contract. You know I tweeted.
Right.
So you send me, not through the smart contract, some sort of IOU that's been signed.
Right.
And this is important because you're not sending it through the smart contract. There's no gas to pay. So
Right.
So
Right, we can do this, that's critical here, is we can do this 1,000,000 times every day,
Right.
and it doesn't cost us anything, we don't have to wait for a transaction.
right. I mean, there's all kinds of different formats, but we could certainly think of a format by which he sends it to me via email, or
Right.
it turns out because of properties of the way we're going to do this, he could tweet the IOU and we'd be fine.
Right. This whole system can run on Twitter.
That's right. So he sends me a bunch of somethings, IOUs, a whole bunch of them. In fact, every time I do something, he says, yes, I owe you for that. And I feel comfortable now knowing I can collect for that. Then at some point in the future, I present one of them to the smart contract, the escrow agent.
Yeah. Let's explain why one of them instead of, right, because what you just said is after each tweet I'm signing an IOU and I'm sending it to you. So one might imagine that each one of those says I owe Todd 25 cents, but now you have 1 million of these,
Right.
and it's really paying you for 1 million tweets at 25 cents each.
I have a lot of readers.
I don't have that much money. And then you would send all of those to the smart contract. It would count them up, and it would pay you for 25 cents each. That scheme is not unreasonable at all, but it does involve sending 1 million messages.
The gas is in some sense proportional to the number of messages I'm presenting.
Right.
It may not be as bad as before, but it's still proportional, and we
Right.
like to avoid that.
Right. And so we can avoid that by keeping a running tally. So every IOU I send, so the first IOU I send says I owe Todd 25 cents. The next one says I owe Todd 50 cents total, 75 cents, etc. And so at the end, I said 1 million. So you've got $250,000 on this IOU. You give that to the smart contract, just one message, so it's as cheap as we can make it in terms of the transaction, and that whole sum gets sent to you.
And
from
then,
the smart
just
contract.
like before, cash gets sent to me,
Right.
and if there's a remainder, it gets sent back to Steve.
It's hard to imagine that after sending you $250,000 for tweeting, there would be anything left. Right.
Right. So this is, and in fact, I guess we can. Right. Let's go through it again. Set it up. A bunch of IOUs. Cash in one IOU because they're cumulative. I'm going to send the biggest one, and I'm only going to accept them in sequence if they're ascending at the right rate. Smart contract knows how much was escrowed.
Mm-hmm.
It can figure out what the IOU is for, and it just does a little bit of math and sends the appropriate amounts each of our ways.
Right.
So this is, in some sense, the design, and we're gonna make this a little more interesting, but that's the basic design.
That's the idea, and let's count the transactions that were involved. There were two, right?
Right.
This is a transaction, and then this was a transaction. In payment channel terms, so we call this sort of a system, a payment channel. I don't actually know where that terminology came from. I think it came from the Bitcoin side at some point, but I don't know where. I tend to sort of think of this as like the channel part, because that's some sort of thing that's established between us where we can send messages and that conveys the value. But you might call this sort of the payment, system might be the
terminology
channel.
is kind of horrible because this original transfer of value is often referred to as opening the channel.
Right.
But this is what
But
gets
that's
sent
the-
on the
the
channel that
channel,
was
right.
opened here. And I should point out one other thing we glossed over, which is
I'm going to call this close. Sorry, I'm just
Okay.
putting in
which is important, which is it cost a little bit of gas for Steve to open the channel on the smart contract. I, of course, want to know that the money's there, but it turns out so I have to interact with the blockchain, but that's a free transaction to just query about a value because I'm not doing any changes.
Right.
So there's actually another step in here which we didn't draw here, which is me asking how much money is in the smart contract.
Right.
Because
Because before you write 1 million tweets, you want to know there's $250,000 in there.
So I ask it, how much money do you have? I know. And then as I'm getting the sequence of IOUs, I won't go beyond whatever has been escrowed because I don't trust Steve.
Right. Okay, so let me poke a hole in this. So we've built this thing. This is great, but look at what could go wrong. So I open this payment channel by sending at least $250,000 to this smart contract, and now you get hit by a bus.
Right.
How do I get back my $250,000? Because only Todd, the recipient of this stuff, is allowed to close this channel. Because otherwise, I could close it early and he doesn't get paid, right? And so you're the only one who's allowed to close it, but you never did any of the work, and well, you got hit by a bus, so you are no longer going to do that. So this comes up, I guess, a lot. This sort of generalizes a lot. You'll see this in a lot of smart contracts.
And a lot of program the blockchain posts. There's the what happens if somebody vanishes problem.
Right, and so and expiration is almost always the answer. And so the simplest model we can have is that when I open this channel, I also put some due date. I say that this is good until I'm not sure if anyone will be able to read that, but December 31st. This is good till the end of the year, and after that, I'm allowed to just unilaterally close the payment channel and get all of the money back. So it is now up to Todd to be aware of that date. It's public because it's part of the smart contract.
It's free for me to query the smart contract and ask, when does this thing expire?
Right. And now it's up to you you better call close before the end of the year, or you're not getting paid anything.
I'm not getting my
right?
$250,000.
And that basically that sort of solves that problem. But let's talk about let's talk about sort of how long that expiration should be. So because this works very well, just as described, this works pretty well if we have like a week-long contract or something. If we actually have like a year-long, at the time we're recording this, it's close to the end of the year, but imagine the expiration is a year out from the current date. We have this problem where I put in $250,000, Todd gets hit by a bus, and I can't have my money back till the end of the year. And this is, there's a large sum in there, and there's a large quantity of time where it's tied up. And this is also a problem. It's not as serious as I never get it back, but it's still like, it's not something I would be comfortable putting a whole bunch of money into.
You wanted to get something for that $250,000 over the course of the year.
Right.
You've got other uses for the $250,000.
Exactly. I want to pay someone else to write all those tweets if
right.
You're not going to do it. And so I want to get that money back. So there are a few solutions to this, but one is not to have like a fixed expiration up front. So the naive approach might be, we open this, there's no expiration, but I can set one whenever I want. But it's not okay if I can just say, okay, well, the expiration is 1 minute from now. Tough, you didn't turn in your IOU, and now I close it and take all the money back. So there has to be some sort of grace period. So when I say, hey, I'm getting ready to close this thing, let's say there always has to be a week at least where you have a chance to go turn in your IOU.
Right. So now that's a parameter of this escrowing smart contract. It's what is the minimum duration that I can make a withdrawal after Steve says, hey, I want to close this thing. I'm done.
Right.
And I won't accept, just to be clear, the interesting thing is I won't accept the smart contracts or any IOUs if that number is too small. If it was set to 2 minutes, I'd just say no.
Right.
But there's some period after which I feel comfortable. And, of course, I'm capable of querying the smart contract for free again, and this is really important. I will know both because the smart contract might fire an event, but also because I could just query it every day and say, hey, when's the expiration date? When's the expiration date? And when I see it's a week out, now I'm suddenly careful.
Right. Right. So that basically, that sort of solves the like long expiration kind of problem. But there's a related problem here, which is like how much money should I escrow? And then when can you get access? Like there's sort of a trade-off of here. If we have this long expiration or this long-running thing, I have to put a lot of money in. I'm glad we picked the numbers we did, because I'm putting in $250,000 at the beginning of this period, say the year.
Right, but
and Todd's not collecting a check till the very end of the year, and we're both bummed about that situation.
Right. And presumably the tweets are happening relatively evenly throughout the year, and so.
Right.
I'm delivering services in the beginning of the year. I'd kind of like to be paid for them. Right. And Steve doesn't want to pay for stuff in December in January.
Right.
And so can we fix that?
Right. One thing we could do is we can just make new payment channels every 2 weeks or whatever. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but now you have to do more transactions. And it turns out there's a fairly simple way to address both ends of this in the contract, which is to allow like repeated deposits and partial withdrawals. So instead of putting in $250,000 at the beginning of the year, I put in $1,000, and I just put in another $1,000 and another $1,000 as we go. So now I'm making regular payments throughout the year. Todd, you can withdraw. You can show one of these IOUs to the smart contract at any time, and it can go, oh, well, I know how much you're owed total. And so it can easily keep track of how much it's given you so far and how much you have remaining.
Right, and the so far is key. So in the beginning, it's paid me nothing. I show it an IOU for $500. It gives 500 ETH. Well, we're talking in dollars. $500.
Right. $500 worth of Ether.
Right.
It's hard to make a video that involves knowing the price of Ether.
Well, maybe every day better than the last. So
you show the IOU for.
I show the IOU for $500. It says, great, there's $500 here. Here's your $500. But the smart contract remembers that it's given me $500, and so in a week when I present it with an IOU for 1,000, it doesn't give me 1,000. It says, "Oh, I've already given you 100, so I'm going to give you the remaining 5." I should have used numbers that didn't add up to the same, but yeah, it's going to give you the amount that you're owed relative to what you've already been presented,
right,
compared to the IOU.
And so now we both get to pick how often we're going to make transactions versus how frequently we're going to pay or get paid. And so if Todd's living tweet paycheck to tweet paycheck, he can go in and make these frequent transactions, but he's going to have to pay for gas to make those transactions. If I don't mind locking up 250,000 at once, I can do that. Like it's up to me how frequently I sort of reload that and whatever. And as before, Todd, you can always look at the smart contract, see how much is escrowed versus how much you've already taken out, and be sure that I have enough to cover the IOUs that I'm writing to you. Okay, so let's talk then about what I just said. This is a decent transition into, like, how do you know? So I give you an IOU. You're not doing anything with the smart contract yet. How do you know that IOU is good? And we've covered part of that in that we've covered, the expiration date, how much money is escrowed, but you also have to be able to, like, validate the signature.
Right. So
and more than that, you have to validate the signature and the amount.
Right. So right. Exactly. So think of it like a check. The check says, I'm giving Steve $100. Okay, great. And then I sign it, and Steve believes it because he recognizes my signature, and the bank will believe it because they recognize the signature.
Right.
And so we need a mechanism that's similar to that.
Right. And so and it's signatures. They're cryptographic signatures instead. But they're signed. But a convenient way to do it is sign it just the same way you sign transactions in Ethereum. We have private keys and public addresses. It's possible to sign something with the private key and then for someone else to validate that it was signed by that public address. And so on my side, I'm going to be, keeping track of this total that I owe Todd, and every time I'm going to digitally sign a message that has that total, and I'm going to send that to Todd, and Todd is going to look at it, check the signature, and then check the amount and make sure it's more than the previous amount and it's less than the total that's escrowed, or less than the total that's escrowed here. And then if he's validated that, he knows with absolute certainty, because he's looked at the smart contract code also, he knows that the smart contract will accept that IOU.
Right. The smart contract, even though my code might be written in something other than Solidity or whatever we use for the smart contract, I'm confident the signature verification operates the same. So any contract, any IOU, any signature I accept, the smart contract will accept. Yeah. And Steve, of course, wants to write things that can be recognized. Now, of course, if for some reason there's a mess up there, Steve writes something that I can't validate the signature, I'm just not going to accept it. I'm going to send him an email and say, we're out of sync.
Right, and I'm not writing a single tweet more until you sign the right message.
That's right. And so those just all have to be in sync. The one signature, these two independent validation pieces.
So let's like recap here by maybe just kind of describing like the interface. So we've sort of built up a system here where the smart contract is responsible for some stuff and we're responsible for some stuff. And I thought maybe we can wrap up by explaining what are the methods in the smart contract, what's the data that's in the smart contract, and then what do we do outside of the smart contract in terms of signing and validating. This won't go to the level of detail. We're going to drive you to the program, the blockchain blog posts that actually cover all of this. But I think just as a recap, because we covered a lot of stuff, it would be helpful to do that. So maybe we put the smart contract up here, and it has you have to
be able to open it.
So you can open the smart contract and you can attach money to that. In our final version, I can just keep depositing. So there's a deposit function where again I can add money in here. There's like a set expiration thing, right? So again, like there's no expiration to start with, but at some point I'm going to set one. And there's a rule here. I don't think we need to put all the parameters in, but there's a rule here that's going to say, well, you can't set an expiration sooner than like a week out, right? But there's some sort of set expiration or start expiration or something like that. Then you get to close the channel, right? Yeah, we'll put that one first. And closing has the effect of sort of shutting this whole thing down, sending the money that Todd's owed to him and the rest back to me. And we have this like we have this withdraw, which says
and it takes an IOU.
Yeah. This withdrawal takes some signed IOU as a parameter, and so does close, right? Both of these accept an IOU and sort of send out money, and that's roughly it. There's another version of close that I can call after expiration. I'm not going to write that, but it exists. It's in the blog post. Okay, and then these IOUs, all that happens outside of this is that we're exchanging these IOUs. Right. And so...
Now, do we want to talk about the fact that there's a couple of... I want to be able to query the smart contract. I mean,
oh, yeah, sure.
What's the balance and what's the expiration date? So
Right, so those... Right, I think those are the two, right?
Right.
Expiration, like that's a query, and then...
balance, yeah.
Yeah, the escrowed balance is a query that you can make. Okay, and so then off-chain, written in Python or Go or JavaScript on a web page or whatever, but not running sort of in the smart contract, we're both doing a little bit of work. I am keeping track of, like, I have a total that I'm remembering, and each time I need to, I add to every time Todd tweets, I add 25 cents to this total, and I sign that total with my secret key. If you use PK, it's ambiguous whether it's private key or public key, so I'm going to use SK for secret key. And that's, I think, it. And I then like email you an IOU. Right. It happens some way completely outside.
Right. And some confusion that we've seen on the web is how he transmits the signed message to me is completely outside the smart contract. I mean, we just agree. He's emailing to me. He's tweeting them.
Right.
I've got a API he can hit. Whatever it is, it doesn't really matter so long as it's something that I can validate.
Right. Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, no one can make any use of this except you, because it's tied to this, and so it could be broadcasted. I guess the risk is someone can close the channel early if they see this, and then that's annoying for us because we have to set up a new one. Right. Or no, that's not true. Only you are allowed to call close.
Right. I was just going to say, we haven't listed here all the parameters for some of it. And we haven't listed who's allowed to call them, but that's all in the blog post.
Right. So you're allowed to close, which means this is just noise to everybody else. So it could literally be written on a piece of paper and posted on a wall, or tweeted to the world, or posted on Reddit. So on your side,
so I keep track of the total I'm expecting.
Right.
So I've got a total as well, and that's more to decide whether or not I'm going to continue doing work.
Right.
I've got an IOU. And in total I'm owed, and at some point, if those get too far apart, I stop tweeting for Steve. And then I can verify.
Right.
And basically I verify some amount, or total, I guess I should call it for.
Sure. Right, so you take the IOU and the total that you think it should be.
Right. And now I take his... What do we use for public key if it's not PK?
Well, actually, address. Interestingly, those are different in Ethereum. The public key that corresponds to that is then used to derive an address. And so really, address is the ultimate thing. Right, so you plug the IOU into this verify thing. It tells you if I actually signed it, and if the amount was right and the signature was right, then you're happy.
Exactly.
And you know that you can...
I continue doing work.
You can close the thing out later, and you're guaranteed to get the money. So the interesting properties, I guess, of this system is very few on-chain transactions, and very little trust required. We're back to the level of trust that we needed when, well, does he write a tweet and then I pay him, or do I pay him and then he writes a tweet? And again, all that's at risk is one tweet and 25 cents. Because once you verified this IOU, that's as good as money. There's no way for you to not get paid.
Right. We've turned, in some sense, or the payment channel has turned risk about getting paid into a potential delay to recoup your money.
Right.
You escrow it, I stop doing the work, and you have to wait a week to get your money back. But
Right.
that, as Risco, that's not bad.
Right.
Right. You don't have to wait that the money just vanished.
Yeah, and that's it. That's a payment channel. This come up a lot when people talk about the scalability of Ethereum or other, hey, I heard that you can only do so many transactions per second on Ethereum. Well, we can do as many of these things as we want. We need a setup step that's on chain, and we need a way to close it down to settle up at the end off chain. But this is a very real, usable scaling solution for these small payments.
Right. And while it's not relevant to the tweet for Steve thing, there's another advantage of the payment channels that we didn't stress, which is that this sending me a signed message can be a whole lot faster than a transaction on chain. I mean,
Yeah,
let's suppose you don't care about the 25 cents or the gas cost, but you want it immediate.
Right.
There's delays on chain, but here there's only the delay of signing, which is essentially nothing. Transmitting, which on a reasonable channel is almost nothing, and verifying, which is almost nothing. And if you're in a situation where you want the work done quickly, but no one's going to do it until the payment's there, this works fantastically well. And we don't change anything. It's just, that's another desirable quality of these payment channels.
Yeah. So check out the links. Go to programtheblockchain.com. We have 2 different posts that kind of do sort of half of this and then the other half, and they have complete smart contract code there, as well as some JavaScript that shows you how to do the signing and verifying.
Right.
Thanks.
Thanks.